One is Lenio, one is Raju. Happy, right? No happy. Okay, if I said like you sleep, By online people. Sairam Balaji. Sriram Balaji. Online people, you completed security exam, sir. Please respond. Sairam Balaji or in Sharminada? Sure. Awesome. Market incentive.
Hello, sir.
Sairam Balaji, you are from what? Sairam Balaji, you are from Sharminada?
Yeah, he goes. Call आ रहा है मुझे। मम्मी कॉल में।
Going to home, huh?
Outside.
Go. So the topic is what today? See, mother soul. Okay, fine. Yeah. See, you log into the bank account login here. You're using bank internet banking, right? Internet banking you use it up. Lego. Everyone banking login here. You guys login into bank account. Internet banking user it. Internet banking used or not used. So when you use the internet banking, internet banking when used. Log into, log out, you can do one operation or multiple operations. Multiple operations you can do, right? Log into, log out. Okay. When you log into the bank account, what happened, server side, I will verify your details, bank, Axis Bank or Access Bank. Bank people assume I am the bank person. As server side, I will validate your details, verify the customer valid or invalid. I will send the one session ID to the browser. One session ID to the browser. For your browser, I'm sending one session ID. The session ID is identified one user, one session ID generated. You are the user. When the login credentials are successful, then I will send the session ID to your browser. The session ID will be stored in your browser internally. Every request, the session ID comes from the browser to server, server to browser, browser to server, server to browser. Every request, in request headers, the session ID is automatically shared. I'm validating you guys, I send the session ID. Session ID is stored in the browser as a form of the cookies. The form of what? Cookies. Session ID is stored in the browser in the form of cookies. That's why sometimes if you delete the cookies and what is asking you enter the username password right because the session cookies are what deleted. Then every request you send in header part your session ID is coming. I'm checking your valid user or not with the session ID. Okay, your the session ID is good. Session ID is done. And session ID is done, then what I told you, your valid user, you are doing a communication. You open the bank account, but you are not doing the operation with 2 minutes. In the bank transaction, generally the session ID is enabled, like, no, we have a time period for the session ID. You can maintain the session ID time. If I didn't receive the session ID from you, the session ID should be invalidated. I got the session ID, I created session ID, I'm setting session ID, I'm checking the session ID, right? The session ID is active in my side. My session ID is active, that's what session ID come to your browser. You do the operation, session ID coming to my server. What the session ID I sent 123, that 123 coming to server. I created session ID 123 only will match. The session ID is matching, I'm sending the request between the both of you, working is done. 2 minutes you are not clicking on any particular banking website. Then I decided from the users 2 minutes data coming or not coming or not. Request is not coming means I decided I will invalidate your session. Invalidate your session means what? Your communication between your account is stopped. That's what when you click on any operation, it is asking what? Login, right? Because session ID is what? Completed. The session ID is what? Completed, right? This is called stateful communication. Stateful communication means what? I'm remembering your previous session ID. Every request you are sending, I will send the session ID to you. You send the session ID to me. I will send the session ID to you. I will remember the client previous details. I remember what? Client previous requested details which make like session ID. That is a process happened based on the session ID section. Based on what? Session IDs. The user is identified based on the session ID because the session ID is present in browser only. After 2 minutes, if I didn't get the session ID, then what happened? Session ID is what? Disabled, right? That is the stateful communication is happening in MVC applications. Because REST I told Lokesh, what I told the REST is a stateful, stateless, or stateless. Because REST API session IDs will not work. Session ID will work in only MVC concepts. Session ID will work only in what? MVC concepts. These application session IDs will work. But REST APIs are what? Stateful or stateless? Stateless. That's what session IDs will not work. JWT tokens will work in the REST APIs. That's what REST APIs MVC needs will communicate between the client and server with the help of what? Session IDs. I'm authenticating you guys based on what? Session ID. Based on what? Session ID. You got it up? One session is belongs to one user, that is the session ID we are communicating. If you are not responding like 2 minutes, I decided your session ID is what? Invalidated. Session ID is what? Invalidated. That is nice happen, that the session ID is happened from the client to what? Server. You open the one tab, like one tab you have done the what we can say. One tab you done the what? Banking operation. Another tab you are doing like some other website you are watching is some other website. Maybe that other website, see for the conversion process, other websites you open, multiple websites you open, only one website is open, banking website, and multiple websites you open other tabs, right? If another tab when you open, guys, most of the hacker websites, what they will do, they will check that, once if you log into one website, guys, I know your browser contains how many websites you open. I can know that. That's why in real time IT people knows that how many tabs you open, the tab used, how much time. Every report comes to HR managers. Every request comes to what? HR manager. Like you open the YouTube this much time, this much content you watch, what this time to this time. Then immediately HR team will send a mail to you are watching YouTube that much time, the company laptop, you please take it. You please take it. That's what don't open any websites in the company laptops. Because the HR team will get the information. What one tab you open, the browser company information will get. The same way, banking is open on the one browser, one tab, another tab is open some other purpose. Other tab, what you open, as soon as there's a hacker website you open, that immediately he knows like what accounts you open in the browser. Then he will send simply request to your bank using your bank, what we can say? Simply you can send the request to what? Bank server. Transfer the money like 10,000 rupees to this mail ID. Like this is UPI address. He will send the request immediately. Then what the bank server will think? Bank server will think this is a correct request because they're coming from the browser. Coming from what? Browser. Then you will transfer the money. So are you said like transfer the money, but the bank website contains a browser session ID, right? What ID? Even if you are logging to another tab, your browser contains one session ID. Your browser contains what? Session ID. Even if you send the request from another tab also, then what happened here? Session ID sent to the bank server. Because same browser you are using, right? Same browser you are using is the browser contains what ID? Session ID. Then when he sent the hacker website sent the request to what bank server, he will send the session ID because the session ID is there in your browser only, right? Yes sir, no? Yes sir. Money gone. Money what? Gone. Session ID is identifying your valid user or not. Because your browser contains session ID, when the hacker is sent the request, when he sent the request, the browser already contains session ID. It along with the request, browser session ID also sent it to what server, right? Browser session ID also sent to what? Server. So we understand that okay, even other tabs send the request to the bank website, the session ID is automatically sent to what bank server. It's saying that you are a valid user, then amount is what? Debited from the account. Debited from what? Oh, you got it right. Debited or not debited? Debited. Because the browser contains session ID. Because session ID is securely available or just a browser contains session ID. Browser contains session ID. Other tab, when the hacker send the request to the bank server, along with the request, the session ID, bank session ID sent to the bank, then the bank decided, okay, the session ID is coming from the browser, he is the correct user, then I will send the request, I will transfer the money to the UPI number. That's all. Amount is gone. That is a problem actually. That is what section ID is secure, not secure. Not secure. Say section ID just identifying your valid user or not. The section ID is there in the browser only. Then a hacker website is sending the request means what along with the request, section ID also come to server side. When the section ID is come to server side, then what happens with the section ID? He thinks like correct user, I will transfer the amount to the target person. And amount is what? That's a problem, guys. To overcome that problem, to overcome what? That problem. To overcome that problem. Session ID is created to identify that user is correct or not. Session ID is created for what? User is correct or not. I generate the session ID once you log in successful. I generate session ID. Session ID is stored in the browser, right? Session ID generated in what? Browser. In your application in the sense what? You have the UPI transfer. When you click on the UPI transfer in your application, observe carefully one last point. Your application, you click on what transfer? UPI transfer. When you click on the button, you when you click on the link like UPI transfer, for that request comes to what? Server, right? Request comes to what? Server. Then every request comes from the server. To that request, one token is generated. For that request, what happened? One token is generated. He click on what? UPI transfer link. Then what happened? One token is generated. The token comes to what? Server. Now you got the two tokens here. One is a session ID to identify user is correct or not. One is what? Token to check that request is correct or not. Because hacker send the request means hacker contains the session ID, but hacker does not contain the request ID, right? Wait, hacker does not contain what? Request ID. But hacker contains what? The session ID in the browser. Because your browser contains session ID, you can send is a valid user. But valid requester, invalid requester, invalid request. Because the request ID generated from the only what? Bank link. What link? Bank link. When you click on the bank application bank link, then only request ID generated. What ID generated? Maybe your session ID is valid from the hacker website, but request ID is valid, invalid. Every request to identify uniquely. Every link when you click, one request is generated, request ID generated, that is called CSRF token. The token is what? CSR. Cross-site resource request forgery, resource forgery, request forgery. Cross-site request forgery. You are forging some other sites, right? To overcome the problem. Session ID means what? The browser contains session ID, hacker can send the session ID directly, no problem. But request what? His link does not contain what? His link contains what? Session ID. His link contains what? Session ID. His link contains session ID, you are the valid user. But that link should not generate what? CSRF token. What token is not generated? CSRF token is generated by only what? Bank application link. Every request link is generated what? CSRF token. If hacker send the request, maybe session ID is correct, he is a valid user. But server will think like he is a valid user, but he is not valid a request. He is not valid what? Request. That's what guys. Cross-site request forgery. You cannot forge that request from other sites. You cannot what? Forge request from other sites. Then tell me what is session ID here. Session ID is identifying the request, identifying the user. CSRF token is identifying the user, identifying every request. Hacker when send the request, session ID will come to the server side. But what? But CSRF token is not generated by his link. What link generates CSRF token? Client link will generate the CSRF token. Like bank application link will generate what? CSRF. That is called CSRF. CSRF attacks. That's what guys, most of the MVC applications enable the CSRF token. By default, CSRF is enabled. Every request is come from the client. That CSRF token is generated. That comes to what? Server. That comes to what? Server. That is called what? Session ID versus CSRF. What is session ID? When session ID is identifying what? Identifying what? Every user contains one session ID. Session ID is identifying the user. You are the valid user or not. But CSRF token is identifying the user, identifying the request. Identifying the request. Because every request when you click from the banking application, session ID come to server side, CSRF token come to server side. Because the CSRF token is generated by your request link, not application link, not like project IDs. Session ID is concerned. If hacker send the request means what he can send? Session ID he can send because the browser contains session ID, but he cannot send what? Huh? He cannot send what? CSRF. That is called CSRF attacks. What is CSRF full form? Request to forgery. That request you cannot forge because he is sending the request. He can send what? Request with what ID? Session ID. But he cannot send the request with what? CSRF. Because CSRF can be generated by only what? Specific link. Specific what amount? A hacker link will generate the CSRF token. That's what this CSRF is. What is it? We have the data. Got it right? CSRF is what? To identify the every request uniquely. Identify every request uniquely, guys. Section ID is what? Identifying every requester. Identifying the user. Identifying the user uniquely. MVC is a stateful or stateless? MVC is a stateful. MVC can maintain the session we can maintain your previous request details. I send the session ID, then again your session ID comes to what server? I need to check your session ID, I generate session ID both on what? Same or not. That is called what? Not stateful. Stateful means what? It will remember the client previous details. That is called what? Stateful. MVC is a stateful or stateless? MVC is a stateful. Rusty is what? Rusty is stateless. Rusty cannot remember any previous details. Rusty is completely what? Stateless. Rusty is completely stateless. Well, that is called CSRF attacks, guys. CSRF means like to enable, to identify what? To identify what? User, to identify the request, to identify the request every request because your application will generate the request, CSRF token will generate it. Hacker will send the request means what CSRF token created or not created? Not created. CSRF token is not eligible for that. No. Attackers they can generate what session IDs. That's what guys. Most of the applications CSRF tokens are available. That's what you cannot forge the request. But before the CSRF, once the browser can send the request, they can what? They can get the details. They can get what? Details. That's a roll up what CSRF. What is CSRF full form, you know? See, it's saying that request to forgery. You cannot forge that request. Hacker will send the request. But you cannot forge the, you know. Hacker will send the request, but he cannot forge the forgery means what? Site forgery is site forgery means what? Writing the site request forgery means bank request ni hacker we cannot what? A forgery cheyaleru. Request forgery means what? Bank request. The hacker cannot send the same request. The hacker cannot send the same request. That is called what? CSRF. Cross site request. A cross site is like cross site request what? Forgery. CSRF is security protection mechanism used to your application to prevent what? Unauthorized, malicious request from. Request from what? Request from being executed behalf of authenticated user. Because hacker also is a valid person. Because of what? Session ID. Yes. Hacker also what? Valid person, invalid person. No. Hacker also valid person. Based on what? Session ID. Because the browser has the session ID, he can take the session ID, simply can send the request. That is called CSRF. Yes. What are I from? Cross site. It means the hacker cannot forge the original request, but he can forge the identity. Someone will forge your card guards, but they cannot forge your what? PIN number, right? Yes. Wait, Nagini. చెప్పా కదా అదే నేను స్టార్ట్ చేస్తేనే ఏం చెప్తున్నారా someone will forge someone will what someone will take your bank to ATM. Someone will forge your identity, but they will not forge your what? PIN number. The PIN number is called what? CSR. CSRF code. IND is what? Account. Account like what you can say. Card is card number. Like that is session ID. What will identify the user? Session ID. What will identify the user? What will identify the user means session ID. What will identify the request? Request to forgery means the hacker cannot forge the hacker can what? The hacker will forge the but they cannot forge what? CSRF request ID. If they request for any generated, right? That's what. It is called CSRF. Okay. CSRF attacks. What attacks? CSRF. cross-site request for child. What is the stateful? The application will remember the. Simply because someone is stateful means the application will remember the client previous request details, just like session IDs. Every time you remember the session ID to follow up the process. MVC applications are stateful. Rest is a stateful, stateless. Rest is a stateless, rest does not remember any request and any details state, the rest database will not focus. The hacker will what? The hacker will hack the session ID, but he cannot hack the because CSRF token is given by every request. You click on the transfer funds, then only CSRF token is generated for that click action. For that link. The CSRF token is generated for that link, but not for the hacker link, right? Hacker link will generate the CSRF token. No. So, pass means what? It gives access to the right? Pass we done. Last one is what? JWT. Tomorrow we'll talk about the JWT. Tomorrow we'll finish the security. Security. Tomorrow we'll finish what? Security. And Monday we'll start micro microservices. Very done. Open the book and write the points. Who want to write the points? Who don't want leave?